The first sound that morning wasn't the wind or the creak behind the cabin. It was the frantic barking of Logan's dogs. It was early spring, the kind of chilly dawn when fog still hugs the grass and the smell of wet pine lingers in the air. Logan, half awake, pulled on his jacket and stepped outside, ready to yell at the dogs for chasing deer again. But the moment he reached the porch, everything froze. Down the narrow dirt path stood a black bear. Her fur was soaked from the morning mist, and beside her, something small moved weakly in the mud. Logan's breath caught. The dogs barked louder, straining on their chains. The bear didn't charge, didn't roar. She just stood there, breathing heavily, her head low, her eyes fixed on him. For a second, Logan thought he was dreaming. A wild bear this close to his cabin, it made no sense. Then he saw it clearly, a cub, barely alive, lying at her feet. The mother nudged it gently, and a soft, broken sound escaped her throat. It wasn't a growl, it was closer to a cry. Logan's instincts screamed at him to get back inside. But something in that sound stopped him. The bear looked up, their eyes met for just a moment, and then she stepped backward. Slowly, carefully, she turned and walked toward the forest, disappearing into the trees. The cub remained on the ground, motionless. The silence that followed felt unreal. Only the dogs whimpered now, uneasy but quiet. Logan's heart pounded. Every bit of logic told him to leave the cub where it was. Nature would handle its own. But as he stood there, the small body gave a faint twitch, and a weak whimper slipped through the air. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. He grabbed a thick pair of gloves from the shed and approached slowly. The cub was tiny, maybe 10 or 12 pounds, its paw twisted at an odd angle, fur matted with dried blood. Logan crouched, the smell of earth and iron filling his nose. The little thing tried to move, but only managed a shallow breath. "Easy, little one," Logan whispered. He could feel his hands shaking. He looked back toward the forest, half expecting the mother to come charging out of the trees. But nothing moved. He wrapped the cub in an old wool blanket from his truck and carried it inside. His cabin was small, just a wood stove, a kitchen corner, and a narrow bed, but it was warm. He laid the cub near the stove, rubbing its side gently with a towel. The cub's breathing was shallow, erratic. Logan opened a bottle of water and tried to drip a few drops near its mouth. Most of it slid off, but a little reached its tongue. He spent the next hour searching his shelves for anything that might help. Old antiseptic, gauze, a heating pad. He didn't know what he was doing, but he couldn't just watch it die. He cleaned the wound on the paw as best he could, then wrapped it loosely. The cub whimpered softly, but didn't fight. By noon, the fog had lifted, and sunlight poured through the small windows. Logan sat on the floor, exhausted, staring at the creature lying before him. He hadn't eaten, hadn't thought about work, hadn't even checked his phone. It was just him, the sound of the stove, and the soft, fragile breathing of a wild animal that shouldn't have been there. "Why me?" he said quietly. The cub didn't answer, of course. But somehow, its presence filled the empty house with something new, a kind of purpose he hadn't felt in years. That night, the wind picked up. Logan placed another log in the stove and glanced toward the blanket. The cub was still breathing, its tiny chest rising and falling. He felt a strange relief, like keeping it alive through one night meant something. He was just about to turn off the lamp when his dogs began to growl again, low and tense. Logan froze. Through the window, under the pale glow of the moon, he saw a shape outside. Large, dark, motionless. The mother bear stood at the edge of the yard. She wasn't growling. She wasn't moving. She was just watching the cabin, her eyes glowing faintly in the light. Logan's pulse hammered in his ears. He didn't move, didn't breathe. For a long minute, they stayed like that. Man inside, mother outside, both silent, both afraid. Then, as quietly as she came, the bear turned and melted back into the darkness of the trees. Logan sat down slowly, his chest tight. He looked at the cub again, still sleeping by the fire. For the first time that day, he felt the weight of what had just begun. The cub survived the night, but just barely. When Logan woke, the fire had burned low, and the cabin was cold. The small bundle of fur by the stove was trembling, its breath shallow and uneven. He crouched down, placed a hand close to its nose, and felt the faint warmth of life still there. Relief washed over him, but fear came right after. This tiny creature was dying in his house, and he had no idea what to do. He mixed warm water with a bit of honey and tried to feed it with a spoon. Most of it spilled onto the towel. The cub whimpered weakly, its eyes half closed. Logan tried again, whispering softly, keeping his voice calm, like he was speaking to a child. The cub licked the spoon once, then stopped moving. "Come on, stay with me," Logan muttered. "You made it through the night, you're not giving up now." He wrapped the cub tighter in the blanket, adjusted the stove, and grabbed his phone. It took a few seconds for him to find the number of a local veterinary clinic. When someone finally answered, he hesitated. "Hi. This is going to sound strange," he said. "I've got a bear cub here. It's hurt. Pretty bad." There was silence on the line, then a laugh. "A bear cub? Sir, are you sure it's not a raccoon or something?" "I know what I'm looking at," Logan snapped. "It's a bear. Its paw is broken, maybe infected. I need help." The voice on the other end softened slightly. "Sir, we're not equipped for wildlife care. You need to call Fish and Game." "I don't have time for paperwork," Logan said. "If I wait for them, it'll die." He hung up, cursing under his breath, and grabbed his truck keys. He packed the cub into a large cardboard box lined with towels and drove toward town, every bump on the dirt road making him wince. The cub whimpered softly with each jolt. The drive felt endless. By the time he reached the veterinary clinic, his hands were shaking. He rushed inside, box in arms. A young woman behind the counter froze when she saw what was inside. "Is that?" she started. "Yes," Logan interrupted. "It's a bear cub. Please help it." The woman blinked, then called out, "Dr. Emily, you need to see this." A few moments later, a vet in her 30s came out, wiping her hands on a towel. Her expression shifted from irritation to disbelief. "You weren't kidding," she said quietly. "How long has it been like this?" "Since yesterday morning," Logan said. "Its mother brought it to my yard and left it there." Emily raised an eyebrow. "She brought it to you?" Logan nodded. "Yeah, she just left it. Like she wanted me to help." Emily didn't comment. She motioned to an assistant. "Let's get it to the table." They worked quickly. Logan stood near the wall, helplessly watching as Emily examined the cub. She checked its pulse, its breathing, and lifted the injured paw. "Compound fracture," she murmured. "It's infected. Probably dehydrated too. We'll need antibiotics, fluids, and stabilization." "Do it," Logan said immediately. Emily looked at him. "You understand that this is a wild animal, right? Even if we save it, it can't just stay with you." "I'm not asking to keep it," he said. "I'm asking you to save it." Something in his voice made her pause. "All right," she said. "Let's give it a shot." The next few hours blurred into one long stretch of quiet panic. Logan paced the waiting room, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Through the window, he could see the forested hills beyond the town. Every now and then, he thought he saw movement in the distance, something large between the trees, but maybe it was just his imagination. By evening, Emily came out. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired, but she managed a faint smile. "We stabilized it," she said. "It's not out of danger, but it's breathing on its own now. We'll keep it overnight, monitor everything." Logan exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Thank you. You did the right thing bringing it in," Emily said. "Most people wouldn't have bothered." He nodded slowly. "Its mother. She's still out there somewhere. I saw her near my place last night." Emily frowned. "That's concerning. She might come back. Bears don't forget where their cubs are." "I know," he said quietly. When night fell, Logan refused to leave. He sat outside the clinic in his truck, watching the dark streetlights flicker on one by one. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't want the cub to wake up alone. Sometime after midnight, the wind picked up. The small town was silent except for the hum of the power lines. Logan leaned his head against the window and almost drifted off. A sound woke him, a distant rustle, a heavy step on gravel. He straightened up, heart pounding. Across the empty parking lot, under the dim light, a shadow moved. Large, slow, familiar. A bear. The same one. The mother. She stood near the edge of the trees, her massive frame barely visible, but her eyes caught the light. Two amber sparks in the dark. Logan didn't move. She didn't either. They just watched each other through the still air, a silent line drawn between fear and something else. All night she stayed there, never coming closer, never leaving. By dawn, when Emily arrived, the bear was gone, leaving only deep tracks in the wet earth leading back into the forest. By the next week, the cub was strong enough to lift its head and look around. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and pine cleaner, but it didn't seem to bother him anymore. Logan visited every day, bringing warm milk and bits of fruit. The staff had stopped asking questions. They all knew who he was now. The man who showed up with a dying bear cub and refused to leave until it breathed again. Emily met him by the front desk one afternoon, flipping through charts. "He's doing better," she said. "We'll need to release him soon. He's not meant to be here much longer." Logan frowned. "He can't even walk properly yet." "He will," she said softly. "And when he does, his mother might still be around. It's better he finds her before it's too late." Logan nodded, but his gut twisted. He had grown used to hearing the cub's tiny sounds, to the way it tried to follow his voice when he spoke. Letting go felt wrong, but keeping him felt worse. When Logan returned home that evening, the air felt heavier than usual. His dogs were restless, pacing near the edge of the porch. He followed their gaze and froze. Near the tree line, maybe 30 yards away, something massive moved, quiet, deliberate. The bear. She was there again. Her fur looked darker against the fading light, and her head tilted slightly, as if she was searching. Logan didn't move. For a long time, they just stared across the distance. She let out a low sound, not a growl, but a deep exhale, and then turned back into the woods. The next morning, 2 trucks pulled up outside his cabin. Game wardens. One of them, a tall man in a khaki jacket, stepped out. "You Logan Reed?" he asked. "Yeah. We've had reports of a bear roaming close to residential property," the warden said. "Your neighbors are worried." "That's dangerous." "She hasn't hurt anyone," Logan replied. The warden gave him a flat look. "Not yet, but if she gets too comfortable near people, someone will call in hunters. We'd rather not let it get to that." Logan's jaw tightened. "She's not a threat. She's just looking for her cub." The man sighed. "We're tracking her movements. Keep your pets inside, and don't leave food out. If she comes close again, you call us." "Understood." Logan didn't answer. The trucks drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and unease behind. Later that day, Emily called. "The cub's leg is healing faster than we expected," she said. "We can try to reunite them tomorrow, if you're ready." He wasn't ready, but he said yes. That evening, he sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the forest orange. The dogs were quiet now, lying close to his feet. He thought about how strange life had become in just a few days. A man and a bear connected by something no one would ever understand. The next morning, he loaded the cub, still small but stronger, into a crate lined with blankets. The drive back to the clearing where it all began felt unreal. Emily followed in her car, keeping her distance. When they arrived, the forest was still. Logan opened the crate slowly. The cub sniffed the air, hesitated, then stepped out on shaky legs. It looked around, confused but curious. "Go on," Logan whispered. "She's out there somewhere." For several minutes, nothing happened. Just the sound of the wind and distant crows. Then a branch snapped deeper in the woods. Logan turned his head sharply and saw her. The mother bear stood between the trees, her fur glistening with dew. She was watching them, silent and motionless. The cub made a small noise, half a cry, half a whimper, and stumbled forward a few steps. The mother took one step out of the shadows, then stopped. Logan held his breath. Everything in him wanted to back away, to give her space. But he also knew she was afraid, not of him, but of everything around them. The cars, the voices, the scent of humans. The cub took another step, then looked back at Logan, as if asking what to do. He knelt down and spoke softly. "It's okay, little one. Go." The bear hesitated, then made a low, mournful sound, and slowly backed away into the trees. The cub tried to follow, but after a few seconds, she was gone, vanishing into the dense green. Emily placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. "She's scared," she said quietly. "She won't come back while we're here." Logan nodded, his throat tight. "She's not scared of me," he whispered. "She's scared of us. Of people." He looked at the cub, now sitting by his boot, trembling and lost. For the first time, Logan understood the weight of what had happened. That mother had chosen to trust him once. But now, because of the world around them, she couldn't anymore. He lifted the cub gently, wrapped it in the blanket again, and walked back toward the truck. As he drove away, he glanced in the mirror. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement at the edge of the trees. Maybe it was her, maybe not. But he couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching, waiting for a world where it was safe to come back. Weeks passed, and the cabin no longer felt empty. The cub had grown stronger, heavier, and louder. Logan started calling him Buddy. It felt right, natural, like the name had always belonged to him. Buddy followed him everywhere, stumbling through the yard, chewing on old boots, and learning which corners of the porch were warmest under the sun. Every morning, Logan woke to the sound of claws on the wooden floor and the soft grunt that meant Buddy wanted breakfast. He'd pour warm milk into a bowl and watch him lap it up greedily, spilling half of it onto the floor. For the first time in years, Logan found himself laughing out loud. The loneliness that had haunted his cabin had been replaced by chaos and warmth. But the balance was fragile. He knew this couldn't last. The first sign of trouble came when he noticed the tracks again, big, deep ones in the soft dirt near the back fence. The mother bear had returned. Logan would see her sometimes at dusk, standing at the edge of the trees, silent and watchful. She never came closer, but he could feel her eyes on them. Sometimes Buddy would notice too, sniff the air, and let out a low whine. Logan could only wonder what she thought, seeing her cub walking around a human's yard, growing stronger every day. One afternoon, Logan was chopping wood when two pickup trucks pulled into the drive. The game and wildlife officers again. Same khaki uniforms, same serious faces. The taller one stepped out first. "Mr. Reed," he said, "we need to talk." Logan wiped the sweat from his forehead. "If it's about the bear, she's staying in the woods." "It's not just her," the officer said. "We received reports you've been keeping her cub. You can't do that. It's against state law." Logan felt his stomach tighten. He wouldn't survive out there, he said, his legs still healing. The officer crossed his arms. "That's not your call to make. Wild animals belong in the wild or in certified facilities. If you really care about him, you'll let professionals handle it." The younger officer behind him added, "There's a rescue center upstate. They can take him today." "Today?" Logan's voice rose. "You want to take him now?" "He's not ready." "Sir, you're not authorized to decide that." Logan stepped closer, eyes hard. "I saved his life. I fed him, treated him, watched over him while everyone else said to let him die. You think some pen or cage is better than this?" The first officer sighed. "We're not here to fight. We're here to make sure nobody gets hurt, animal or human." Buddy, sensing the tension, waddled out from behind the porch. The officers stared, speechless for a moment as the young bear sniffed the air and sat down beside Logan, like a loyal dog guarding his friend. The older man lowered his voice. "Look, I get it. You did a good thing. But this can't go on. You'll have to hand him over." Logan didn't answer. The conversation ended there. The trucks left, but the warning hung heavy in the air. That evening, he sat on the porch as the last light faded. Buddy lay beside him, head resting on his boots, eyes half closed. In the distance, he could hear faint movement in the woods, a branch snapping, a soft huff carried by the wind. She was there again, watching. He spoke quietly into the dusk. "I know you're out there. You've been waiting." He looked down at Buddy. "He's strong now. You did good bringing him to me." The next few days were filled with unease. Logan knew the officers would come back, maybe with a warrant. He couldn't let Buddy be taken away to some enclosure, far from the forest he was born in. But he also couldn't keep him here forever. The cub was growing fast, and soon he'd be too big, too wild. One morning, Logan packed his backpack with food, water, and the thick wool blanket Buddy loved to sleep on. He placed it in the truck and looked around the cabin. Every mark, every scratch on the floor, every memory from the past weeks burned into his mind. He didn't know if he'd see the cub again after this. Buddy climbed into the passenger seat, nose twitching at the smell of pine through the open window. Logan smiled sadly. "One last trip, pal." He drove toward the same clearing where it all began, the place where the mother had once left her dying cub on the cold ground. The forest was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that makes every sound sharper, every breath louder. Logan parked the truck and sat for a while, just listening. Then he whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll come back here. Just you and me. One more sunrise." He reached over and ran his hand over Buddy's fur, feeling the warmth, the steady heartbeat beneath. "You belong here," he said softly. "Not with me." As the sun began to set behind the ridge, Logan looked out at the trees and knew what he had to do. The next morning, when the light broke through the mist, they would walk into that forest together, one last time. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains when Logan woke. The air was cold, heavy with fog, and the forest beyond the window was still, a gray sea of silence. Buddy was already awake, pacing near the door, his small body swaying with impatience. He had grown so much, his fur thicker, his eyes brighter. Logan watched him for a long moment, trying to memorize every detail. "All right, buddy," he whispered, forcing a smile. "Let's go." He packed the same wool blanket, a small container of fruit, and a flask of warm milk. The truck engine groaned in the cold, and the sound echoed through the valley. The drive felt endless. Logan barely spoke, his hands tight on the wheel, the weight of what was coming pressing on his chest. When they reached the clearing, mist still clung to the ground. The place hadn't changed. The same crooked birch tree, the same moss-covered rocks. This was where it all began. He turned off the engine and sat in silence for a while, the ticking of the cooling motor the only sound. Buddy looked out the window, sniffing the damp air. Logan opened the door, and the young bear jumped down, landing softly on the grass. He sniffed the ground, then turned toward the forest, ears twitching. Logan followed, carrying the blanket under one arm. "You remember this place, don't you?" he said quietly. "She's out there somewhere." They walked slowly toward the trees. The air smelled of rain and pine, and somewhere far away, a raven called. Every sound felt sharper, every breath heavier. Logan could feel the forest watching them. But he stopped suddenly. His nose lifted, body tense. Logan followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing, just shadows. Then she appeared. The mother bear stepped out from between the trees, her massive form outlined by the pale morning light. Her fur glistened with dew, her eyes dark and calm. She didn't move closer, just stood there, breathing deeply, her gaze fixed on the cub. Logan froze. Every muscle in his body wanted to step back, but he didn't. "It's okay," he said softly. "He's yours." Buddy let out a low sound, something between a whine and a chirp. Then he took a few hesitant steps forward. The mother lowered her head, watching him carefully. When he was only a few feet away, she leaned down and touched her nose to his fur. A deep, quiet rumble came from her chest, a sound of recognition, of love. Logan's throat tightened, his vision blurred, and he had to look away for a moment. When he looked back, Buddy had turned toward him, eyes wide, as if unsure what to do. "It's all right, pal," Logan whispered. "Go on. You're home now." Buddy hesitated, then gave a small snort and turned back to his mother. She took a step backward into the shadows, and he followed. They disappeared slowly into the trees, their shapes fading between the trunks until there was nothing left but the sound of rustling leaves. Logan stood there for a long time. The sun had begun to rise higher, burning the fog away. Birds were starting to sing again, the forest coming alive. But for him, the silence inside was deafening. He walked back to the truck slowly, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the clearing's edge, he turned once more toward the forest. The birch tree swayed gently in the breeze, and for a moment, he thought he saw movement. Just a flicker of brown fur among the shadows, but it vanished before he could be sure. He started the truck and drove home in silence. That evening, Logan sat on his porch, staring at the mountains as the sky turned gold and purple. The cabin felt empty again, but not the same kind of empty. This one carried peace, not loneliness. He thought about everything that had happened. The first night, the fear, the long hours in the clinic, the way Buddy had grown and trusted him. Somewhere deep down, he knew that letting go was the only right thing to do. The next morning, he stepped outside to feed the dogs. The sun was already up, warming the wet grass. As he bent down to fill the bowls, something caught his eye near the porch steps. It was a branch, thin, dry, stripped of bark, and placed carefully beside the door. He frowned, then smiled, his throat tightening all over again. He picked it up gently, turning it in his hands. "You're welcome," he murmured. He placed the branch on the porch railing and looked out toward the forest. The light shimmered through the trees, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard that same deep rumble from the woods, the sound of a mother calling her cub. Logan smiled. "Goodbye, Buddy," he said softly. "Stay wild." And with that, he went back inside, closing the door behind him as the morning sun spilled across the porch, warm and bright, just like the promise that life always goes on.